Welcome back to Little Pilgrims Progress. It's been a while. Sorry for the delay. Anyway, where were we last time in our story? Well, I don't remember. It's been so long. Just kidding. I do. Anyway, little Christian and Hopeful, they made it to the shepherds, and they were finally free from the giant Despair and his wife. And now they're ready for the next leg of their journey. Let's see where they go. Chapter 37, The Rock of Error and Mount Caution. The next day, when the little pilgrims were preparing to continue their journey, the shepherds came to them and asked whether they would go or would like to go for a walk upon the mountains before they went away. Christian and Hopeful thought they would enjoy this very much. So the shepherds went with them over the broad green slopes and along paths that had been cut upon the sides of the hills. "Well, it's not safe," said Knowledge, "for strangers to walk across these mountains alone. But the king allows us to take some of the pilgrims to see the view of the celestial city." Presently they came to a steep path that was rugged and not very easy to climb. It led to the top of a great rock, and when they reached the highest point, Christian and Hopeful were glad to put their hands into those of the shepherds and hold them very tightly indeed. The rock was just at the edge of the mountain, and when the little pilgrims looked down from it, they could see a valley far below them, and upon the ground at the bottom of the valley lay the bodies of many dead people. Ooh. "Did they fall from this rock?" asked Hopeful. "Why, yes. This is the Rock of Error, and pilgrims who leave the way of the king and wander upon the mountain alone are fond of climbing up this pathway because they think they will have a better view from the rock. But when they look over the side of the deep valley, it makes them giddy, and they fall, and are killed." Then the shepherds took the children to another place, which was called Mount Caution. From it they looked up upon a wide plain where the numbers of men and women and children were walking up and down, but they walked in a strange way, stretching out their hand as if to feel what was before them. And Christian noticed that they kept stumbling upon the rocks. "Are they blind?" he asked. Experience answered that they were. "Did you see a stile on the left-hand side of the road? Not very far from these mountains." "Yes." "Well, beyond that stile is a path that leads to a strong castle. In the castle lives a giant named Despair. Many pilgrims go over into this meadow because near to the stile, the way of the king is rough and stony, and the giant's path looks green and smooth. Then they almost always lose their way, and Despair seizes them and carries them to his castle. He's very cruel to them, and at last, if he does not kill them, he puts out their eyes and brings them down to this plain where they wander about until they die." Christian and Hopeful looked at each other, but they did not speak. Perhaps if they had not escaped from Doubting Castle by the help of the little key, they too would have been left to perish upon the plain. The shepherds now went down the mountains, and on the side that was farthest from the way of the king, and soon they came to a spot that reminded Christian of the entrance to the dark valley. Great black rocks hung over the path, and the children could see only a very little distance down the narrow road, because of the thick mist that lay before them. "Well, this is another dangerous place, and pilgrims who walk along upon the mountains are often lost here. That path leads into the country of the wicked prince, and pilgrims who enter it are never able to find their way back again," said Knowledge. All these things made the little pilgrims very thoughtful, but Christian afterwards said, "I am glad that we saw them, although I was frightened, because now we shall be very careful indeed about keeping the way of the king." Ignorance. Chapter 38. Last of all, the shepherds brought the little pilgrims to the top of a hill called Mount Clear, from which they could see a very long way indeed. Far in the distance, a beautiful light was shining, which dazzled their eyes when they tried to look at it. "Well, you see, in the midst of that light is the celestial city," said Shepherd. "If your eyes are strong enough, you will be able to see its gates." But the light was brighter than that of the sun at midday, and its glory was too great for human eyes to see and to bear. I can only see it shining. Well, it is too bright for you, said Sincere. But we have a glass called Faith, which will make it seem clearer. Christian took the glass, but the thought of the king's city, which he had so longed to see, made him tremble, and his hand shook so that he could not hold the glass steadily. Then Hopeful tried, but then tears came to his eyes. It dazzles me, but I think I can see something like a gate. The walk upon the mountains had taken up the whole of the morning, so the shepherds led the children back to the tents and made them rest a little while before they went away. Oh, when you've traveled a little further, you will very likely meet a man called the Flatterer. He will try to lead you out of the way of the king, but you must not listen to what he says. Then Watchful told them that they would soon come to a place called the Enchanted Ground, where the air made the pilgrims feel very sleepy. Well, it was part of the wicked prince's country long ago, and if his servants find you sleeping there, they will carry you away. And who knows what happens to you after that. It's not good. We will give you this little map, said Watchful, putting a sheet of paper into Christian's hand. All the places you will have to pass are marked upon it, and if you look at it carefully, you cannot lose your way. As Christian and Hopeful went down the mountain, they talked together of all the shepherds, what they showed them. Oh, if we could only have seen the celestial city, said Christian. I should have been so glad. Well, we did see the glory of it, and we know that now it's not very far away, praised the king. At the foot of the mountain, the boys came to the corner of a little crooked lane. This lane led from a country called Conceit, and a lad was running along toward the way of the king when Christian and Hopeful passed by. Where do you come from? Asked Christian, for the boys soon overtook them.
From the country beyond the hills. I am going to the celestial city.
But do you think that they'll let you in?
Oh, why not? They let everybody else in.
Well, not everybody. We have our roles to show. Did the king send you one?
No, but I don't suppose that will matter. I am his servant because I always do what he bids me. I have heard that he wishes people to leave their own lands and travel to his city. So I'm going just as you are.
But the king's pilgrims ought to come in at the wicket gate and pass by the cross. Then the shining ones bring them a white dress and a roll. I'm afraid you didn't know that.
You needn't make such a fuss,
replied the boy whose name was Ignorance.
I don't know where you come from, but very likely you were living near the wicket gate. And of course it was convenient for you to enter. It is a very long way from my home, and nobody ever thinks of going to it. In fact, I don't believe that anybody knows the way. We have that pleasant green lane, which saves all trouble and makes our pilgrimage shorter.
Christian scarcely knew what to answer, and as Ignorance stopped to gather some fruit for the little pilgrims, the little pilgrims passed on without him. He did not run after them, and Hopeful said, Shall we wait for him? I think not. Perhaps he will join us presently. Chapter 39, The Story of Little Faith. Christian and Hopeful had not walked very far before they saw a band of soldiers in the distance. They were clothed in dark armor, which did not shine as Christian's did, and the little pilgrim knew that they belonged to the army of the wicked prince. Do you think they will hurt us? Said Hopeful. Well, I don't know. And the boys both felt scared, although they kept steadily on their way. But as the soldiers drew nearer, the children saw that they had a prisoner among them, and they knew by his clothes that he was one of the king's pilgrims. The soldiers were hurrying him along, and they took no notice of Christian and Hopeful as they passed by. The pilgrim hung his head, for he was ashamed to let the children see his face. He had once loved the king, and he had traveled very nearly to the gates of the celestial city. Then he began to wander from the straight path, and before long he met with some servants of the wicked prince. who pretended to be very kind to him. He stayed with them, and soon he forgot the good king and left off obeying his laws. He allowed his bright armor to grow rusty, and his garments became soiled and ragged. His role was lost, and no one would have known that he had ever served the king at all. But one day something reminded him of the celestial city, and he began to feel sorry for what he had done, and to wonder whether the king would forgive him. After a while, he left his new friends and tried to find his way back into the straight path. The wicked prince heard that he was gone and sent a band of soldiers to look for him. And when the poor pilgrim drew his sword to defend himself, he found that it was spoiled with rust, and he could not use it. So the soldiers tied him up with chains and were now taking him back into the country of the wicked prince. Christian and Hopeful were glad that the soldiers did not speak to them, but they were also very sorry for the pilgrim, who seemed to be in great trouble. I remember when I was at the Palace Beautiful, I read a story of a pilgrim named Little Faith, who was robbed not very far from this place. I think the wicked prince's servants often come here, and we must be very careful, or they perhaps will hurt us.
Tell me about Little Faith. How was he robbed?
He was very tired, and he sat upon the grass to rest, and he fell asleep. It was just at the corner of one of the lanes that we had passed, so it was not a safe place to sleep in. 3 bad boys, I think their names were Faint Heart, Mistrust, and Guilt. They were playing in the lane, and they saw Little Faith lying at the corner, so they thought they would steal his things. He was just walking when they seized him. Before he had time to get his sword, they threw him upon the ground and beat him dreadfully. Then they took all the money out of his pockets, and perhaps they would have killed him, but they thought they heard someone coming. Who was it? There wasn't anyone really, but they knew they were doing wrong, and they were scared. There's a little village called Good Confidence, somewhere among these mountains, and Great Grace, one of the king's captains, lived there. The boys thought he had seen them, and so they ran away.
And what became of Little Faith? Was he hurt very much?
Yes, but they had not found his role. So although he was grieved to lose his money, he felt comforted, and after a little while he was able to get up and go on his journey. Well, that's it for this week, boys and girls. Thank you for tuning in. Wow, what an adventure. The shepherds, such a great help. They warned Hopeful and Christian to stay away from 2 particular places, which I want you and your parents, or rather I'd encourage you and your parents to look at and talk about, and then who they met along the way, and what it meant that the dark soldiers captured Little Faith, and what that means, and what it means to make your way to the celestial city. That's still Christian and Hopeful are faithfully pursuing.
Y'all ready for this?